それではお時間となりましたので始めさせていただきます。ホール A、本日最初の講演は、マイケル・ミグラシオ様から、Leading Engineers to Water, The Art and Science of Engineer Coaching です。それでは、マイケルさんよろしくお願いします。マイケル、Mike is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today. I am going to be discussing how to be an effective engineer coach, but I think the title of my talk might be a little confusing. So the title actually comes from an English kotowaza around guiding people. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The idea is that you can guide someone, you can advise someone, but it is up to them whether to take your advice. They need to be willing to accept help. My talk focuses on techniques you can use to not only guide the engineer to water per se, but also encourage them to drink. My name is Michael Migliacio. I go by Migs. I am a lead software engineering coach based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in America. It's nice to meet all of you. Thank you so much for coming. So where exactly am I? I'm actually in the middle of America to the north part here. We get a lot of snow in the winter. The closest city to me and where I work when not during COVID is Minneapolis. There's a picture of Minneapolis there as well. A very little bit about me as an introduction. I've been in the software industry for about 20 years. 8 of those years have been in e-commerce at places like Best Buy and Target, so large retail companies in America. I have launched games in America and Japan, and video games. I've also presented at Tokyo Game Show. I have a little bit of Japanese experience. I've studied for 4 years. I'm a volunteer interpreter for the Bloomington Izumi sister city. So I have many friends in Izumi near Osaka. Recently, unfortunately, due to COVID, we haven't had many visitors, but hopefully someday soon. My ikigai, or we would say my dream career, is to little by little connect the world through teaching technology every day. A few pictures, the article in the Nikkei about my game, a picture of my family, my wife, Lisa, and son, Aiden, a picture of my host family in Izumi when I stayed there. COVID, of course, has made it very difficult to go to a gym to work out. So I'm a huge fan of rhythm games. So I've invested in an arcade platform to exercise every day and kind of help with, COVID, not being able to go to a gym. And also, I love barbecue. Let's talk a little bit about thinking outside the box. Many of you may be familiar with a proverb, a frog in a well knows nothing of the great ocean. I'm sure that's familiar to some of you. There's actually a related kind of similar concept in English. We talk about thinking outside the box. So the idea here is the box, in this case, as you see in the picture, is very similar to the well. It's comfortable, it's well known. If you're in the box, you understand the rules, but you're not going to get a lot of innovation. because you're operating in a very small space. The idea is to open your mind to new ideas, new innovation. So though the frog is happy in this case, he's kind of missing out on the bigger world by staying in his well. And in very much the same way people often do by sort of staying in the box. So I'm going to challenge all of you today to spend some time thinking outside the box and broaden your horizons to a new world. First, let's talk about the engineering mindset. In order to coach engineers, you have to understand them. So I've been an engineer for a long time now. And just like everybody, engineers are going to be different. They're individuals, but there are some common traits that a lot of engineers share. Engineers want to do their best work. Their work consists of solving technical problems on a daily basis that are extremely complex. In other words, it's hard to do their job, and it's even harder to do that job well. Combine that with all of the requirements around the business operating in an organization. So leaders, requirements, integrating with different teams, a lot of different challenges that occur not only in the technical world, but also in the human world as well. And engineers have to combine both skill sets and work in both of them every day. If you want an example, look no further than DevOps. It fuses engineering, testing, and operations acumen together. And all three of them have to be on point in order for that effort, that DevOps effort, to succeed. None of it's easy. Here are a lot of the challenges. I talked to some of them on the previous slide that engineers face on a daily basis. We can talk about arbitrarily chosen deadlines by leadership. Leadership may decide that a particular feature is due the next day with no warning or reason. Leaders can often decide what technology to use after attending a conference or something without any input from the engineering team. There's things like scope creep, personnel conflicts, team members just not getting along, corporate politics, technical arguments where people dive too far into detail and spend too much time arguing about small technical things as opposed to focusing on the larger business need. When I give this talk in person, I often ask, how many managers versus engineers are in the room? It's usually about half and half. And based on feedback, it sounds like both sides often understand the kinds of problems that occur, but approach them very differently. Another thing that I want to briefly talk to is the concept of imposter syndrome, which comes up in America quite often when we talk about training engineers. Technology is an extremely broad industry. There are many frameworks, many technologies, many ways of solving a problem, and no one knows it all. But ironically, social media, internet, corporate politics, all of these things make many engineers feel like they should know it all, or at the very least pretend to. And that leads to a lot of problems down the line, during coaching in particular. So let's take a look here. As you learn a new technology, at first, things go pretty well, right? You figure, this is easy. I can figure it out. Until you kind of hit a peak here. You're pretty confident in what you know, or what you think you know. Over time, as you dive deeper into the technology, you start to get a little not feel so well. You start to not feel so good about this. This is a lot more complex than I thought it was. Maybe I'm not cut out to be an engineer after all. What in the world are Lambda functions? And on and on and on. And this is actually where many, many people get stuck, is down here in the valley of despair. When you've spent some time with a technology and you get to a point where you realize it's a lot more complex than you initially thought. Of course, for experts in a technology, everybody's felt that way. And eventually people start to get comfortable with the fact that they don't know everything. And this is when they can climb out of the valley of despair and into the slope of enlightenment. So the whole idea of the slope of enlightenment is not that you know everything about a particular technology. It's just you become comfortable with the fact that you don't know it all. As coaches, it's our job to make sure people don't get stuck down here in the valley of despair. So let's talk about the role of an engineering coach. Next up, what makes an effective coach? What's our purpose? What kinds of experiences do they have? And more importantly, what can we do to help teams be successful? A coach is many things. A coach can be a technology and process advocate, someone who's well-versed in the patterns of architecture in use across the enterprise, someone who can help guide teams to make appropriate decisions. They can be a team confidant. They can be the interface between the team and leadership. As a neutral third party, they can discuss issues and bring those issues to leadership without being directly in the line or in the chain of command between the leadership and the team. So they can speak for the team to their leader in a safe manner. And of course, we're stakeholders. We're invested in the success of our teams. When I talk about the skills of an engineering coach, like what do I do on a daily basis? I would say there are 4 main parts. One is acting as an engineer. Another is acting as a teacher. A third is acting as a guidance counselor. And a fourth is acting as a technical evangelist, someone to spread the word about new technologies and exciting developments in an organization. These 4 roles are something that I fill every day. But most importantly of all, we're change agents. We're catalysts for new technologies and ways of working. We encourage teams to change and work better together. The problem is, how do we begin to change how a team operates? That's the difficult part. What sparks change? Inertia is a very powerful force. There is a huge force that makes sure that teams stay the way they are. In group-oriented cultures, it's even stronger than in individual cultures. Teams won't change generally on their own unless it's more comfortable, or excuse me, it's less comfortable for the team to stay the same than it would be to change. And that actually takes a pretty powerful force in order to make staying the same so uncomfortable that they're willing to try something new. That's where you come in as a coach. Your job isn't to make things uncomfortable, but to encourage and enable change with minimal risk while making your team as comfortable as possible. Allow your team the opportunity to try new things, agile types of experiments that can be quickly measured and iterated on and improved. And failing is safe, low risk. There are a couple of things to keep in mind when taking this approach as a coach. The first one is empathy, and the second one is influencing through trust. Let's talk about that. How can we as coaches encourage and empower teams to change? Through the concept of empathy. So when we're talking about empathy, we're not talking about pity, which is being sorry that something happened to someone else. We're also not talking about sympathy, which is feeling sorry for someone else. Where we're going is into the realm of empathy, which is feeling with someone, not only understanding their pain, but feeling it with them. And also into compassion, where it goes beyond feeling pain, but into being inspired by someone. The coach has to operate here in the realms of empathy and compassion. In English, we have a saying, walking in someone else's shoes. So not only understanding the client's problems, but feeling them yourself, walking in their shoes, being one of them. Next up is the trust and influence infinity loop. This is a way to build trust and influence teams. It's actually based on original work by Mike Kottmeyer of Leading Agile. It serves as a model for developing trusting relationships and delivering positive outcomes across development teams. I personally believe that we need to build trust before we can influence. And that process begins with access. So talking to the team. Then the all-important concept of empathy, not only understanding their problems, but feeling them along with them. And of course, through empathy, you can move forward to understanding their point of view, so you know exactly where they are. And at that point, you're able to build safety with them. They trust you. You're one of the team now. You're part of the group. You're invested in them. They're invested in you. And that leads to influence. So starting with agency, again, being one of the members of the team. Into integrity, deciding as a group the path where we're going and being true to that with each other. And then into competence, doing the thing, basically building the product. And then results. How did it go? What could be improved on? What have we learned? And then it starts all over again. The reason this is an infinity loop, right, as opposed to one and done, is because every time a coach will engage with a new team, or even with a team that they've engaged with before, they have to build trust all over again. And the reason for that is the team's circumstances could have changed. There could be other people on the team. They could be working on something entirely new or different. They could have a lot of external pressures from leadership, from product leadership, from other places that are dictating some of the issues that they're experiencing. And so all of that has to be understood before you can act as an influential figure on that team. So I'm going to say the word empathy a lot today, and that's because it's so important. You have to meet people where they are, not where you wish they were. You have to meet them where they currently are, not where you want them to be. And interesting side note that most technical problems that I'm recruited to solve, so engineering problems, are actually people problems in disguise. And what I mean by that is simple. Say that an engineer comes to me and asks to learn a particular testing framework. After talking to them for a little while, it becomes clear that they're not coming to learn the testing framework because they want to write tests or that they understand the value of testing. They're coming to learn a testing framework because their leader has requested, after being in trouble for a recent outage, that all teams write a certain number of tests. That testing framework might or might not be the right solution for that particular problem. It definitely requires a conversation with the leader to decide whether what needs to be tested. It requires a lot more nuance than just simply teaching them the technology and moving on. A lot of technology problems are very similar. They have people components as well. Let's talk about a problem-solving process. Technical coaches do not own the solutions that they help the teams build. This is true even if the technology is something that the team is learning for the first time. And the reason for this is simple. The coach cannot be the one to get the call at 3 a.m. when production goes down. The teams have to be able to make the decisions for themselves and to own those decisions. This goes against our instinct as engineers on a daily basis. It takes a lot of control to not get in there and start writing code with them. It is a lot easier to tell someone what to do than to coach them to a solution. And the only way the team is going to become self-sufficient and learn and be empowered is by coming to those solutions on their own, but with your help. Our goal is to empower teams. We're going to do this through a 5-step process. Step 1, demonstrate empathy. Yes, empathy again. And the reason I bring it up right now is because no matter how large or how small, the team needs to understand that you are invested in their success. You're invested in them. It's especially helpful if you've seen the problem before and can tell them so. For example, learning how to set up a new CI/CD pipeline can be difficult. I know because I didn't understand it either at first. I can help. Step 2, hand the problem back. Remember, it isn't the coach's job to create the solution. It's to guide the team towards their own solution. As such, don't do this for them. Find out what they've tried so far so that you, as a knowledgeable resource, can provide options for them to choose from. Often, they'll lean on the coach when an error appears or something doesn't go according to plan. If that happens, it's important to spend the time working through those issues with them to teach them how to solve it on their own. What do you think you're going to do? What have you tried so far? Step 3, ask for permission and give suggestions. Request permission from the team to weigh in and provide suggestions for the problem they're trying to solve, as well as potential positive pros or negatives, cons of each. Alternatively, find out if they're more interested in discovering the solution themselves. And if so, ask if you can help them seek the resources where they could find existing solutions to their problem or similar problems. In other words, ask them, would you like some suggestions as to how to solve this problem? Or would you like some tips and tricks that have worked for me in the past for similar issues? Step 4, let them make their choice. Allow the team, the agency to make that choice on their own. This transfers ownership from the coach to the team and enables the team to remember and be empowered by what they've learned throughout the discovery process. And coaches often, because we help so many different teams, we don't often have the full context of the architecture or the system considerations for each team's individual solution. The team will have much more context than you would as a coach. So teams may defer to coaches by default. So it's very important to let them know that their opinions are not only valued in the decision-making process, but are in fact vital to it. Trust the team to make the choice that works for them. The team will own all the decisions throughout the discovery, knowledge gathering, implementation. You're just there to provide guidance, not to solution. Step 5, wish them luck and follow up. It's an important part of the process to communicate to them that you are in their corner regardless of the choice they make. Support them, maintain a good attitude, and follow up on their findings. You may learn a thing or two for helping other teams. I can tell you from experience, this has happened to me a lot, where I will help a team through a problem and I'll want to come back and find out how they solved it, because in many cases, other teams are going to be having similar issues. Here are some tools of the trade that we, at least where I work, where what we can do to guide teams to better solutions. The first one is mob programming and pair programming. So these are very, very important knowledge sharing tools, and we very much support them and advocate for them to leadership in many different organizations, because not only do they serve as a way for teams to understand and work on code together, but it allows a deeper sort of understanding that breaks down silos. It makes it so that we don't have one developer. Often I like to call it a hero developer that will own most of the complicated code without a lot of context provided to the rest of the team. This is a problem because when anything goes wrong and that hero developer cannot be found, it takes a lot more time, energy, and effort to get back online. It takes a lot of time, energy, and effort to fix the problem. Whereas if we would have introduced mob programming and pair programming for those kinds of issues, the knowledge would be shared across the team, and we wouldn't be dependent on one person to make those choices or to fix those issues if something were to go wrong. Immersive learning space. Unfortunately, in COVID time, we don't have access to this right now. But as a member of a coaching team that has access to a dojo, an immersive learning dojo on site, we will have teams come to our space to learn with us. We do not coach in their space. And the reason for that is simple. Without their leadership, without external distractions, people can come in and learn a new way of working without constantly being pulled back to what they're so used to, the familiarity of their own workspace. As coaches, this allows us to make a new space for them that supports their new way of working. So when they go back to their old space, they can bring that knowledge with them. We have hands-on workshops, hands-on exercises, guided learnings, trainings, traditional tech trainings. We have labs where people can go hands-on with a new technology. And we have things called workshops where folks will bring in their own products to the dojo or to us as coaches, and we'll work with them on their individual products. So we have ways of introducing new technology to these teams, but also we will enable them to make progress on their own technology as well. We have remote tooling for guided and self-learning paths. We are huge advocates for the power of Zoom's technology. Things like Zoom annotations, which would be translated as the comment feature of Zoom, where you can draw on the screen, is super helpful as a learning tool. Things like polls or breakout rooms, where you can split up groups of engineers into different sub-conferences where folks can kind of learn together or solve problems together, is very, very effective in learning remotely. Because we don't have access to a large classroom or a large pod space where we can sit everyone down and actually work through an issue together. We have to do it in this format, just like I'm doing here with you, a little bit different, but very much the same way. So we have to find new ways of providing interaction to the engineers that we coach. We also have video self-learning paths, so different video series that introduce new technology in different ways. And this is something I'm actually very proud of my employer for. My employer, Target, actually allows every engineer up to 50 days a year of work time to learn new tech. So to be able to empower teams across the board with new technology. And finally, empathy. Yes, again. That concludes my presentation. So if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, you can find me at Angsty Gaijin, both on Twitter, and my website is listed there. You can also email me. My email address is on the screen. Japanese or English is perfectly fine. Thank you so much.
マイケルさんありがとうございました。何かご質問ある方はいらっしゃいますでしょうか。オンラインの方も、もしご質問ありましたら直接声をかけて構いませんし、またマイケルさんはディスコードにもいらっしゃいますので、何か、聞きたいことがありましたらそのまま声をかけていただいても結構だと思います。はい。では、ここで、終了とさせていただきます。マイケル、Thank you very much。どうもありがとうございました。